and the Sixers. Our next guest is a basketball and sports media legend, host of the starting lineup on NBA on SiriusXM, ESPN contributor, covers the Nets for Yes Network, Frank Isola. Frank, thanks for your time. How are you today, sir?
Good. What's going on? How you guys doing?
We're doing okay. You know what's going on. And so I just wanted to ask you, Frank, to what extent, I know you've tweeted about this or posted on X, I should say, to what extent would you say the Nets are in or want to be in on this DeAaron Fox trade talk, such as it is?
Well, yeah, the Nets are definitely interested in acquiring good talent. And what's DeAaron Fox, only 27 years old? He's certainly talented. They have the assets to do it. The one thing about the Nets, though, where, and this would be the holdup, I'm sure they're trying to keep their own pick for this year because that pick, there's a good chance it's going to be top 5, top 6, depending on what happens with the Pelicans. Maybe they could actually get into the top 4. I wouldn't consider the Nets the favorite at this point, but they're certainly interested because they're in a position with the assets that they have to try to go and do something. I know they want to, they want the high draft pick. I understand that. But even if you look at Oklahoma City, which used a lot of those draft picks to get better, really, how did they get better? They went out and made a trade for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So it's never just one way of doing it. And if a player like DeAaron Fox is available, that's why so many teams would be interested.
Hey, Frank, what's up, man? Kyle Draper here, man. Thanks for jumping on with us. Knowing the history of Rich Paul and Clutch Sports, how much do you think this is a power play by them to steer their client to a particular destination?
Well, number one, it's good to see Kyle. You've done well since you left Scalabrini. Your career's taken off. That's
Thank you. I leveled up, big fella. I leveled up.
Oh my God, you become big time now. I think you're right. And it's funny. Jimmy Butler, in theory, is doing the same thing that DeAaron Fox is doing. The only difference is that DeAaron Fox is playing every night. And I was there on Monday night in Brooklyn, where he played really well. He had the 16 points in the third quarter. And even though the score was still close, I think it was 86-85 at some point in the fourth, I thought kind of DeAaron Fox's energy and his scoring kind of changed the game. It changed the momentum of the game. So you have, at least he's going out there every night and there's still a winning team. But I think you're right. I think they certainly have a team in mind. And I'm sure it's San Antonio. He is a Texas kid, right? And you look at, San Antonio with Wembanyama. But the other thing for Sacramento, and I think that the position for them stinks because, they drafted this guy, they developed him, they're winning right now. So it stinks that he doesn't want to be there. But at least San Antonio does have assets. They have players. They have a lot of draft picks. So it's not, it's not like it's the worst thing if they were to make a deal with the San Antonio Spurs.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday, Frank. It'd be worse if his intended destination was someplace where they didn't have any assets and they didn't have any players you wanted. So we'll see. But it looks like, as you say, it could be worse. To that point, Frank Isola with us here. How tricky do you think it would be for the Kings here to make a trade before the deadline without essentially tearing the whole thing down?
I know that's the other thing. Right now they've been playing well since Doug Christie got promoted to head coach. They're on this road trip right now. I mean, if they beat Philadelphia, which they should be able to do, they're in pretty good position going into their game. I guess where they have Oklahoma City and then Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Usually in these cases, a lot of times that deal doesn't happen until right around the draft. And also by the time the draft rolls around, everyone kind of knows where they're drafting and things of that nature. So a lot of times huge, massive trades like this don't happen until the NBA draft. The other part about it, too, is I had heard that once the coaching change was made, the idea was, and you guys know this better than me, that Sacramento wanted to see how everything played out. And if the things started to go south, well, maybe they would change gears and then start maybe trading some guys off. But I actually think it's the other way. I mean, right now they're in contention for a playoff spot. And that's why that's a tough one to make a deal like that. So it would certainly help San Antonio in the short term and the long term. It would hurt Sacramento. If I were them, because they can get a deal right around the draft. I'd wait for them.
Hey, Frank, you're out there in New York. We saw what Brooklyn was able to get for Mikal Bridges. A lot of people consider that an overpay. I'll readily admit that. But what kind of haul can you get for a guy like DeAaron Fox? What's his value in your opinion?
Well, I mean, that's a good point because you look at what Utah received for Rudy Gobert, all those draft picks they got. And I thought Sean Marks did a really good job with Mikal Bridges, who's better suited in that role with the Knicks where he's the third, probably fourth guy, somewhat like he was with the Phoenix Suns, and they got a ton of draft picks back for him. I mean, DeAaron Fox is a former All-Star in this league, and he's entering the prime of his career. The Sacramento is going to be really smart about this. So, yeah, he could say he wants to go to certain teams, but they're going to have to get, a lot back from him, multiple draft picks. To me, you also want, players that are somewhat established. You don't want to just get nothing back for him, not just draft picks, but I think they'll be able to get a lot. Look at what, Oklahoma City kind of set the market with the Paul George trade. Look how well that's worked out. Obviously Utah with Rudy Gobert, Sean Marks. Sean Marks originally, with the deal getting Kevin Durant to Phoenix, they got all those picks. And then they added even more by trading Mikal Bridges. So I think Sacramento, when you're dealing with a guy like De'Aaron Fox, it's going to be a pretty big haul. I don't think Sacramento in this one, if they make the trade, they may be losing the best player in the deal. That's probably a guarantee that that's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure they can make a good deal for themselves.
Frank Isola with us. Frank, before we found out this recent turn with De'Aaron Fox, a lot of Kings fans were focused on John Collins and potentially Cam Johnson. Now, I don't know if maybe there's still an avenue for that. Maybe there's not. I want to ask you, if I may, do you think the Nets and Kings were ever close on Cam Johnson, and where do you expect Cam Johnson to be the day after the deadline?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think the Nets are in the same position. First of all, he's under contract, and he's played really well. And he handles himself. He's a professional. He's an adult, and he's a competitive guy. I love the way that he's played this year. So for me, the Nets are still in a pretty good position where they don't have to trade. He's still a young guy. Mm-hmm. And if they could kind of turn this thing around within a year or two, why can't he be part of it? But I think there's a lot of teams that are interested in Cam Johnson. If you add Cam Johnson to Sacramento, that'd be a really good pickup. The guy, he is a big-time shooter. He could knock it down, and he's got really good range. To me, he's really coming to his own. I think he was maybe a little overshadowed from Mikal Bridges. That seemed to be the signature player in that deal that they made with the Phoenix Suns, and the two of them had been together for a couple of teams where their nicknames were twin, because they were kind of attached at the hip. I really think when you look at the two of them this year, I think Cam Johnson's had more of a breakout year. So the Nets know they're sitting on a really good asset. I just wonder if the Nets are really, in that much of a rush to get rid of him. Remember there's two guys, the other night, but Cam Johnson's out there working out before games. I know that he's carrying like a minor injury, but to me, they're not playing him just because they're just waiting to see what can happen between now and February 6th.
All right, Frank, let me ask you this too, by the way. Jordi Fernandez, how has he handled, he was just here, he was a fan favorite here. How has he handled all the tumult in Brooklyn this season?
I give him a lot of credit. I think he's been outstanding. And, early on, and, I do the radio show on Sirius in the Morning with Brian Scalabrine, and Brian brought up a great point. He had said, Jordy's too good. He said it's just like when Brad Stevens first came to Boston, and Danny Ainge had, a lot of these young players around, and they were winning too many games where Danny Ainge had to start trading up the players because Brad was doing too good of a job. And the same thing is happening with Jordi. Like, Jordi brings, what I like about him, he brings a certain seriousness to the program, and maybe it's a European thing. Maybe it's the culture over there. I watch a lot of the European soccer, and I feel like the managers are the same way. Like, he never makes excuses. He doesn't start at, well, we didn't have this guy, and Cam Thomas is hurt, Cam Johnson is hurt. Doesn't matter who they're playing. He never uses that as an excuse. Now, do I think some of the losing is starting to wear on him a little bit? I would think so. But he has a standard that he sets. He demands, accountability from his players. I've been really, really impressed with the way that he's handled himself with the media. I think he's great in interviews. He's had some really interesting moments where he's kind of called the team out, which I thought his timing was pretty good on all that stuff. You guys know how it is. I mean, the guy put in a lot of time with a lot of different organizations. He's not from here. He didn't play in the NBA. So, it's hard for a European guy to become an NBA head coach, but he put in the work and he's hit the ground running. All coaching at all these different stops, including the last 2 years in Sacramento, has certainly served him well.
Frank, I got one question.
Ask one more. Has, big fan of your morning show, but I don't know the answer to this. Has Kyle Draper been featured on Battle of the Broadcasters, to your knowledge?
He absolutely has.
Yes.
He absolutely has. I mean, I think Kyle, first of all, Kyle is a great guy. He does a good job. And he's actually, I'm going to be fair, he's a good-looking guy. but the people that they've replaced him with over the last 2 years are much better looking than him. I'll say that.
Wow. Yo.
I mean, Amina Smith. I mean, it's, no offense. I mean, but Kyle's great. He's the man.
Hey, Frank, I was going to ask you, man, does Scal ever say how much he misses me? But darn, I guess not. Shoot.
No. He does. All kidding aside, like really where you get, the unfiltered stuff, it'll eventually get us fired because we'll say something on a hot mic. But during breaks, he would always rave about you. And Brian, as they say in New York, he's a hard marker. He doesn't just pass around the phrase that much. He like, but you know how it is. Like you're in a place like Boston, like you're doing like a pre and post game show. They're like people are really tuned into that stuff because they're nuts up there in Boston for their sports teams. It's so intense. So you're under a microscope every day and you deliver. That's not easy to do.
Look at that,
Appreciate
Drake.
it, man. Appreciate it.
Frank, we appreciate your time very much. We're big fans. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Gentlemen, have fun. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
All right, man.
Kind of a backhanded compliment there, Drapes.
Right. He was giving me love and everything, and then bam. It's all right. I expect nothing less from Frank. Nothing less.
There's one thing.
Why Frank on here lying like that?